scripture is from Luke 15, verses 1 through 3, and 11b through 32. I'll get a little closer to the mic. Here we go. Luke 15, verses 1 through 3, and 11b through 32. Now, the tax collectors and sinners were all gathered around to hear Jesus. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." So he told them this parable. Jesus continued, "There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, 'Father, give me my share of the estate.' So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together with all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed the pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, 'How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am, starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.' So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fatted calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' So they began to celebrate. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. 'Your brother has come,' he replied, 'and your father has killed the fatted calf because he has him back safe and sound.' The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, 'Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders, yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fatted calf for him?' 'My son,' the father said, 'you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad, because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.'"
To state what I am going to assume, but still needs to be stated, what I'm going to assume is obvious to you. To state what is obvious, this is not a time of ordinary politics. This is not a period of time where there are some who are reasonable Republicans and some who are reasonable Democrats disagreeing, yet trying to do what they believe is best for the country in line with the Constitution and the rule of law. This is not that time. We are in the midst of regime change, a phrase usually used for other countries, not our own. We are in the midst of an autocratic takeover of our country and of our government, of a federal government, quote, government, of individuals driven not by the Constitution and the rule of law, but by vengeance, greed, and cruelty. Bear with me a while. I was saying to a colleague upstairs, PVP colleague, who's also preaching this morning over at the UU church. She doesn't usually preach, so I was surprised to see her in the church this morning. And we just chatted for a minute, and I said, I don't like that I have to preach on this every week. Bear with me, we have to preach on this every week. Because this is really not normal, what's happening. It's not ordinary. And it can't go unspoken. It can't go unaddressed, especially in our communities of faith, in our places of worship. So part of me apologizes for those of you who hear me week after week bringing politics into the mix here. But the part of me that's rooted deeply in God knows that you understand I have to bring it. And we, as this particular community of faith, rooted in, like our open and affirming statement says, a loving God who we believe loves all God's children, and that we seek to stand together seeking justice, healing, and wholeness of life. We especially have to be speaking from our groundedness in God in this moment. So be with me, please, in this. There are several categories of actions that this administration is taking that underscore their takeover, what they are about. Several categories, just two of which are, first, the illegal dismantling of congressionally funded agencies. Right? That was the first wave of things that we experienced, the wham-bam first wave, the dismantling of things that the legislation, which is our representatives, had funded and said this should be funded. That's a big category. The second, again, these are just two of many avenues of takeover. The second is the illegal abduction, detention, and deportation of at least hundreds of people from this country, with that number growing, from their homes, from their schools, from their ordinary daily lives, from here to there and in between. The first is what we saw first, as I said, and in those first days of the administration, they fired, again, illegally and effectively shut down agencies that had been built up and funded for our protection, for our health, for the building of relationships internationally. Always imperfectly, right? All of it can be critiqued, but they existed with a worthy mission. And this whole category of actions is disruptive, alarming, and dangerous enough. But the second category, this one is existential. The Trump administration used an old law, a very old 1789 law, called the Alien Enemies Act, to deport more than 200 Venezuelan men without due process, as an attorney in our midst says. That act, the Alien Enemy Act, was created in 1789 to authorize the president to arrest, imprison, and deport so-called aliens from countries at war with the United States during wartime. Venezuela is not at war with the United States, and we are not in wartime in that way. We are in the midst of losing our democracy, which is its own kind of war. The Trump administration wants us to look away from that fact, the fact that it is an illegal application of this ancient law, and cast our anger not at the administration, but cast our anger at Venezuelans. Cast our anger at, these people who are part of these gangs that they say is the reason they're being deported. In addition to the illegal removal of these hundreds of Venezuelans, the Trump administration has targeted students and scholars at U.S. universities who have in common that they have spoken, written, or acted in support of Palestinians. These individuals have all been here legally in the United States on valid school, work visas, or at least in one case, as legal permanent residents of the United States. Again, all without due process. The Trump administration wants us to look away from the fact of these illegal actions and cast our anger not toward the administration, but in this case, rather, toward those who speak or write or organize for Palestinians. They want to activate anger in us. They want to take our rage at what's happening or our own discomfort in our own lives, our own feeling like there's not enough, and they want to direct us to enemies of their making. We must be on guard, as we always need to be, but especially now, we must be on guard not to be manipulated into hate. We must be on guard not to have our anger twisted in the wrong direction. The Trump administration wants us to assume that they are acting with some good intention, some well thought out rationale, that ultimately they are protecting us, that they are protecting us from some enemy who has gotten in. They want us to believe repeatedly that the enemy is the immigrant, that the one making our lives difficult is the immigrant. That is a lie, a manipulation, and an abuse of power. There are no good intentions at play here. This administration is not at all concerned about protecting us. And if you were not sure, you have the signal gate thing, which I won't preach in depth about, but you have that, which is sort of like, look, they're not trying to protect us, right? So if you were wishy-washy with, well, maybe they're not trying to protect us. They're seeking to divide us. They are seeking to divide us. I'll say one more thing here and then come back. Just important to hear, Timothy Snyder, I've quoted him before, he's a well-respected scholar of authoritarianism, and he's writing daily on his Substack. And in an essay he wrote March 17th, in regards to the illegal deportation of the Venezuelans, he just wants to be clear. He says, everyone in the United States has the right to a fair trial with due process of law. People who say things along the lines of, quote, enemy combatants don't have the right to due process are wrong. And it is important to understand the implications of that position. Anyone can be named, quote, enemy combatant. More fundamentally, once you accept any exception to the general rule, you are just inviting executive power to always use that exception or make up another one. Snyder emphasizes, if you are a citizen and you are casting doubt on the importance of due process, remember this. You need due process in order to prove that you are a citizen. What do we do? How do we live through this? The impacts of this regime are getting closer to home. They're getting nearer to us. We will start to feel the impacts of the removal of funding. Right? We will start to feel ourselves or our neighbors struggling to make bills that they used to be able to make because they had Section 8 vouchers. We will start to notice changes in what's available maybe at food pantries. I mean, we will see impacts to health insurance. We will start, which we already see impacts to health insurance, but it's not perfect. But it'll become closer and closer to home. And certainly with this second existential category that they are using, which is to target individuals for their political speech or action, we are all vulnerable to that. And so it will keep getting closer and closer to home. This is scary. It's a fact. It is scary. I know on the first, I have already connected, we're asking the question here with core leaders, what can we anticipate about the needs of our neighbors, the needs of our community here? What can we anticipate about those needs in terms of what needs are going to increase, and how can we as South be ready to respond to them? So one of the things we can each do is try to do that. Anticipate the material needs that are going to come down the line and organize with our organizations, with our partners, create partnerships to help address the needs, the material needs that show up. All along the way, a really fundamental thing that we need to do over and over again is to stay connected without apology to our values, to stay connected to our ground, to stay connected to the ground of God, the God of this prodigal son story. God whose love is always inclusive. God whose nature is to say, come, not get out. In the midst of what will be increasing chaos, increasing reasons to be afraid, we need to hinge ourselves all the more to our deep hope, which is faith, or deep hope that we belong to one another, to not buy into the lie that you, because of where you come from, or me because of who I love, are a threat to you. During the I wrote it too. During the Reconstruction period in this country in the 1850s, which was after, which was trying to integrate, after Civil War. Yes, after Civil War. Thank you, Stephanie. I was like, that's not the right timing. They can't integrate if they're not free yet. Which was after the Civil War, trying to advance integration of the formerly enslaved. There was active resistance from the enslavers, from those who had been enslaving, to pit poor white people against poor black people, the formerly enslaved, to make them enemies of one another. It was a manipulation. We were manipulated into hating one another in that way. Instead of focusing our ire on the dang slaveholders, right? Now, of course, the Civil War had happened, so that had been focused and progress made, but it had to continue, right? Because to actually enact the laws and live by them that are going to support the integration, it needed broad-based organizing across differences. It needed clarity in the people enough to know that though we might be different in these ways, we are fundamentally on the same team in this way. That's something we need to keep holding to or find our way to in these times. Because our protection against the scary that is not silence. Our protection against the scary that is not isolation. It is not in taking up enemies that we are being manipulated into hating. Our protection is not in hating on others. Our protection is with each other. It is rooting ourselves in God's ground and each other. Again, just to draw the story out, the prodigal son story that Carol read so beautifully, the story often focuses on the son that comes home, the one who's gone and had profligate living. And that's a focus of the story, and I'll come back to that at the end. But the moral part of the story actually hinges on the elder brother. Okay, so this part, the elder brother, right? He's like, don't I deserve a feast? Don't I deserve everything you're giving to my younger brother? Because I've been here this whole time and I've been steady. And, I want that cake. Why didn't you make it for me? This is dismissive. But, and so the story says basically we have God is the father, is the father figure in this. And God's saying, no, you're with me the whole time. We have to celebrate his return. We have to welcome this return. The moral hinges on not hoarding God's grace, not hoarding comfort, not hoarding security. This elder son has lived securely in his father's home. He has had all good things. And he wants it all for himself. And the brother becomes, in a way, his enemy in that moment. And God says, no, come on, there's enough for everybody. That's the whole fundamental truth of God, is that there is enough in God. There is enough in God's love. You don't need to be at war with each other here about this. Come, you are welcome, God says. I'll quote from Diana Butler Bass, a favorite of mine, and she says, in the narrow view of Christianity that is active, that we heard Vance talk about, where you had that inner circle of people you're supposed to care about. Do you remember this? Inner circle, and then, if you have some time, you can go a little further out, and if you have a little bit, you can go a little further out, and et cetera, et cetera. That the Pope has actually spoken against. Diana Butler Bass says, in that view, those who support that narrow story, the story is narrow. The Father only welcomes a repentant Son, a God who only embraces his only children. It's only an allegory of individual salvation for only a few. But it isn't that. God loves everyone, welcomes everyone, embraces even those who have done the most abhorrent things, even things that twist their humanity beyond recognition. God welcomes those whom you don't even want to know exist. God's story is welcome, welcome, welcome. Not go home, go home, go home. Friends, in the midst of these days where we are going to be pulled apart, I encourage us all to dig deep, to remember God calling us home. You are home, you are home, you are welcome, and to imagine God doing that to every single one here, to all of our neighbors, calling us home, calling us to the same table, the same feast. I encourage us to be brave in organizing across what might feel like differences, what might be differences rather, but are not antagonistic. They're not enemy differences. They are just differences. That we organize across those and that we activate the power that we already have and don't let them take it away. And for those of you who might be feeling far from home, it might be more of a soul-searching moment right now in your own life. As the Indigo Girls song that's called Come On Home says, the team you're hitched to has a mind of its own. If you're feeling hitched to some team that's kind of controlling you in a way that you don't want to be controlled, I hope you hear the invitation today. Come home. Come home. Amen.